dialogue with the OpenDaylight community to start asking you guys, what do you need from the Apache Karaf container? All of OpenDaylight is built on top of our container. You're using our architecture, a lot of our concepts for how applications are developed. We use our feature definitions. We use our security model. You have our deployment, our provisioning. All of those things come from our project. So as a user of our project, you would have a lot of experience now of how you're using it and you're developing your own best practices. That being said, a lot of those best practices, we'd love to be hearing from you guys and having those communications sent back to us to ask us about our plugins and any toolings to be able to make a Karaf a better container for you and for everyone else to use. So I'll start by introducing myself. Most of you will probably recognize me by my IRC name, ICBTS. It's short for I Code by the Sea, which is the name of my blog. So that's where that comes from. A lot of people pronounce it ICBits, but it's just ICBTS to me. I'm a committer at Apache Service Mix, Felix, and Karaf. The reason I'm telling you about Service Mix and Felix is that Karaf originally came from the Service Mix project. It was an enterprise service bus, and we had a small little sub-project called the kernel. The kernel was our initial way to be able to make that command line into the JVM so we could see what's going on, have an easier time manipulating it, adding and removing programs. That grew up and we went over to the Felix project where we got a lot of our OSGI skill sets and brought a lot of the OSGI community to us. We renamed it at that time from kernel to Karaf to help signify that we're going from being something about being like an operating system to being more about the OSGI ecosystem. So the whole Karaf name just being a little bit of a homage to the idea that we're a container, you pour in your application, and then it allows it to breathe and it becomes easier to drink, hence the Karaf. And then we just named it that way. Eventually in 2010, Karaf became a top-level project, and we have our own community and we have our own release cycle, so we've been growing and expanding since then, and there's a lot of really good stories coming from Karaf now. I'm also a part of the Apache Karaf PMC, the Project Management Committee. We are the group of people who overlook all of the committers at the project and help set the roadmap for where Karaf is going and what additional sub-projects and such go on with our community. I'm also part of the ASF actual membership. So that's the group of people who overlook all the other projects at the Apache Software Foundation. I'm an author. I've worked on the books OSGI Starter, Learning Apache Karaf, and the Apache Karaf Cookbook. All of these books have to deal with getting enough of the initial skill sets to work with an OSGI ecosystem, how Karaf works, and just getting an easy introduction to using Karaf. And then the cookbook is just a set of recipes to help developers get very quickly into making routers or web services and adding data stores, etc., to the container. So I'd like to start off with telling you guys a little bit about our latest release, Apache Karaf 3.04. This release is generally a bunch of bug fixes and a very small number of improvements and additional features. The biggest thing in here of concern for OpenDaylight community is that 3.04 has some initial inklings of the upgrades you'll see in Karaf 4.0. The area you're going to be concerned about is in features. Karaf 3 has a little bit of extra code to allow it to handle what will become a Karaf 4 style feature, but in a deprecated mode. It can't actually execute and use the additional pieces we've put into Karaf 4. It just allows it to have a little bit of an inkling to go forward. This is intended to help developers start to edge forward, going from Karaf 3 to a Karaf 4 environment. On top of that, we are working on Karaf 3.05. We do tend to have a long longevity to our Karaf releases. I always use the example of Karaf 2. We have the 2.1 series, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. I just did a 2.4.3 release a couple of weeks ago. Karaf 2 series has been out for almost 5 years now. So we do tend to go quite a long time in the longevity of these projects. That being said, we are up to Karaf 4 now. Karaf 4 is our current main development branch. We have done a lot of work refactoring and reorganizing what's going on underneath the hood. A lot of that has been in the area of how features are handled, which a lot of people are going to be very happy about. So the big question I've been asked all week long has been, how are you guys handling feature uninstalls? Right now, we are doing it in a much, much more humane manner for developers and users alike. So the example I have on the board is just showing the Jindy service being installed. We can see the basic set of bundles being instantiated into the Karaf. then we can see when we uninstall it, all those bundles have been removed. And then the immediate question is, well, what happens if we don't know what's going to go and get removed when we want to do an uninstall? We have the ability to throw in a flag that basically says simulate removing a particular feature. So in this case, I just have a little bit of the log output you can see there because I couldn't put it through the entire screen. Saying if I want to simulate removing Jindy, it will then go through and figure out what bundles in this I'm going to actually have to remove, so that way it's logged and an administrator or DevOps person can say, here's everything that's going to disappear if I was to remove feature A. So it just gives you that kind of help and let you see if you're going to have a conflict or determine if you want to go ahead with that procedure. We don't prevent you from being able to do it, however. It's still up to you. If you want to remove feature A, go for it, but you can simulate it and find out what's going to happen beforehand. So diving into that features resolver, all the work that happened here was focused on making things easier for all people involved. What we are adding in top of this now is the ability for checking of requirements. So if you're very familiar with the OSGI specification, you have the ability to require certain things from your platform. Example would be, do you have J2E 1.8 specification support from your platform? Do you have a graphics display with a particular resolution on your platform? It's something that people tend to overload and reuse to be able to say, this is something on my platform that's available on my devices. A really good thing that you have. Now in your feature file, when you start specifying, I have these sub-features I want, these configurations and properties and bundles, you can also add in requirements to be able to specify things from the platform. So that's a new addition that you'll get in Karaf 4. It's really been looked for a lot of the OSGI ecosystem. We still have support for old style features as well. So Karaf 2 style features, Karaf 3 style features can still be deployed here. They'll just be in a sort of degraded mode because they won't have access to the additional things such as the requirement if it's from the old schema. If you want to use the new style feature, you're going to have to pick up the new namespace 1.3. So we have done a couple of things here that anyone who's making their own distributions based on Karaf are going to need to be aware of. We've changed our repository structure. So before you have seen enterprise and the standard repositories as being part of Karaf, so OpenDaylight would pick those up to be able to grab the basic things like SSH and config-admin and all those services. We now have split that out into enterprise, framework, spring, standard, and static set of repositories. This allows us to have more control and more delineation over where things are being spread. Very similar to OpenDaylight, where we have the questions of what repositories are going to be hosting certain projects. We've had it in 2 different places. Now we're spreading it out over 5 because it just makes our lives easier to manage those life cycles. Various schemas that we use within Blueprint or just within any of our XMLs have been updated. So the current one we have is going to be Karaf Features 1.3. That will allow you to use requirements. Shell has a new one of 1.1, and Jazz has a 1.1 XD. Basically, these are going to allow you to connect into the new way we are writing commands in Karaf. We've moved ourselves from using purely a Blueprint way of instantiating our commands to using declarative services. To help aid this, we've created a Karaf Services Maven plugin that'll help allow a set of annotations to write our commands. What this has allowed us to do is to really minimize the size of our container when we want to instantiate it, because we don't have to keep instantiating all these Blueprint contexts. So we now have a service, completion, parsing, and a reference annotation that you can write into your command code to be able to wire everything together when you're booting up the Karaf container. So in OpenDaylight's case, as it's creating commands, you can now switch over to a declarative service model to be able to produce code where you have everything in just one file instead of having your command code and having an XML file that you need to reference to see how it's all wired together. So that will help reduce your actual runtime size of just a basic container, which is a really good thing, especially on constrained devices, say as a Raspberry Pi or Intel Edison or one of those little neat toys. We've also gone through the Karaf Maven plugin and started working through on trying to consolidate and just clean and streamline how it works. A lot of the targets that you would use for creating your own distributions, such as the assembly one, which is used by OpenDaylight, have been just streamlined to make it easier to use, better documentation included. We've also developed one as a features validate descriptor, and that's a really neat one. Basically what it's going to go through is it'll take your feature file, that big XML that says all your bundles and figs, and it can just validate if this is well formatted and if things are available for it to be imported and brought in. this has been something that's been missing in Karaf for a while as a tool, and a lot of people will be implementing it external from Karaf, so we finally have this brought into the Karaf project because everybody's had that same issue. So that's a big one, and I can expect the people in OpenDaylight will want to be using that just to validate our features being written in a good manner. Moving from there, there are a lot more things in Karaf 4 that is going to be interesting to users, but it would just take too much time in this kind of a format to dive into the nitty-gritty of all the really neat, cool things. What I do want to do is change subjects a little bit about a new project that we're currently in process of voting in to make the first 1.0.0 release. What I want to talk about is Apache Karaf DECANTER. DECANTER is a monitoring and alerting solution for Apache Karaf. What we have designed is a project that allows you to deploy a feature into Karaf that's going to let you be able to monitor the runtime characteristics of your container and the applications deployed within. As an example screenshot, this is from running Camel route. Camel's something that allows you to implement enterprise integration patterns. It's very similar to routing, so the OpenDaylight people should be very familiar with the idea here. Basically, Camel just says you take information from point A, send it to point B. So what we're seeing on the screen is just some exchange of metrics that Camel keeps about how long does it take a message to be enqueued and put from one end to the other. The way that we're able to do this is we have an extendable system of collectors and alert setting mechanisms. So I'm just going to bring up the decanted information here. There's two types of collectors that the decanter will put into your container. One is going to be a event-driven collector, and the other is going to be a scheduled collector. Basically, you're going to be looking at using these things to say, I want to be looking for special events that OpenDaylight would be sending out to the system. Or every 5 minutes, you're just going to check some web service to say, hey, I got port 9191, it has a RESTful service, and it needs to be doing its job in under 100 milliseconds. And if it's not doing that, we're going to set an SLA level, service level agreement level, to say that, yeah, the service is alive, it's pingable, but it's responding in 200 milliseconds, which is our client says, no, it has to be within 100 milliseconds or we're going to be in trouble by contract. So a really cool thing. This is a very dynamic system. It's OSGI under the hood, so obviously it's extendable and you can upgrade and you can change things in. The big parts you're going to be learning about in here is our scheduler, our dispatcher, all of the appenders. The appenders is the area that we're going to be able to collect data from your running system, so stuff from your logs or stuff that your services are sending out. And a notifying system. So this is the important part for how you're going to alert for your SLA. Is that going to be a case of as a log statement? Are you going to be sending off an email? Is a pager going to go off somewhere? Your DevOps is going to be woke up at 2 in the morning to say, hey, these ports they're alive, but they're just not responding quick enough. So we think that this is a project that people are probably going to want to take down. And in OpenDaylight's case, what I would put forward to you would be this might be a candidate to take this project as an upstream project, just like Karaf, and then on top of it add in the OpenDaylight branding, of course, and then create a project to collect appenders and SLA level alerts, things that could talk to your northbound, your southbound for MDSAL or for whichever service to just say, is this operating on your controller in an optimal fashion? And I think there would definitely be a project that could be built around this kind of a model, especially considering that we already have the base monitoring tool created and is available from, shortly will be available from Apache once the vote passes. So for the road ahead, what I really want to bring towards everyone at OpenDaylight is that we want you to be talking to us at Apache Karaf. We're really friendly people. I mean, take it from Ed, we're nice, friendly people. We have a lot of ways for you guys to contact us and start asking questions and finding out what our roadmaps are, asking about our tooling, our documentation, how do we use Karaf or any of our sub-projects. We take emails at user@karafapache.org. We have our JIRA that you can go in, that's just our bug tracker. You can submit feature enhancements, sending us patches, which we really want. Jump in on apache-karaf@ircfreenode.org. That's our community IRC room. We're there all the time. There's people all around the world able to talk to you, and just if you want to ask quick questions. The big thing I really want from OpenDaylight is whenever you guys get to a situation where you're seeing things you want to extend and you start creating an OpenDaylight, but something's just a generic fix or something you see that was, say, from a resolve or from how XML files are parsed or a command that should really exist for everyone. If you create it, come back to Karaf, submit it upstream. I mean, if it's something that everybody's going to want, we're most likely going to review the code, and if it looks good, we'll put it right into Karaf upstream so everybody gets it. So it's just, that inter-community collaboration. It's really, it's essential, because right now, watching the information coming back from OpenDaylight over the last year or so that's been on top of Karaf since the helium and the lithium release, I don't see enough information coming back. And this is why I'm here at this conference, is just to ask you guys, yes, please keep talking to us. And if there's ideas to improve what we're doing or to how to make things easier for everyone, let us know. We're all around for you. So at this point, I'd love to open up to the discussion portion for questions, comments, anything really from the field. You have the microphone, Louis?
Yes, only coming from my side, we're going to be leveraging this decanter probably very quickly. So we'll get your feedback on how it is, because this is what we are looking for, right, Demo? Like another people, like some way to monitor the container or the thing that really is running for OpenDaylight, whatever it is, control the memory, the process, and all these kind of things. So this is perfect.
Awesome.
Can we programmatically get that data? Sorry.
Yes, that's all the data that's coming up on the screen for that one is actually being dragged out from the MBeans, so JMX data is coming from there. But I mean, the appenders you have to create and alerts you have to create. You take basically the template code, and then you're going to have to implement specifically. So we have ones for CXF, ones for Camel, one for ActiveMQ, because we come from the SOA world, and those are the projects we're closest related to. But in OpenDaylight's case, you would want to have stuff created for MDSal. You'd want ones for other southbound and northbound plugins, so that way you'd be able to collect the data that they would need. Because at Apache Karaf, we don't know what those projects are going to require. It's not our domain. So what you would want to do is just set up a repository or a collection point, some kind of project here at OpenDaylight, where your committers would then create the appenders and the analyzers SLA code that you would need to have to monitor those services. Because you guys would know the domain side the best, but just reusing our structure to be able to plug it in and load it up and start being able to monitor.
So you had mentioned to me out of band over beers about some stuff coming out in Karaf 4 involving spawning LXC containers or Docker containers.
Okay, so there's a feature that's under development, and I don't see the command in the current .0.0 release of 4, but there is a Docker IO project that is underway to allow there to be an ability to spawn up a Dockerized container of Karaf. Generally, the way I would put it forward is being, people are using Docker all over the place. It's like catching fire. It's being used in every vertical you can imagine, between government and financials and healthcare. Everyone is doing this. So from our point of view, it's something that we would take care of at the level of the container, because if you're having to reinvent the wheel for a base Karaf, it's part of our responsibility to make sure that it's easier to do and provide any features or any kind of tooling that would be required. So that would be one I would point you towards if you want to start communicating back with the community who are starting to build and maintain that bit of the code base. Your experience working with OpenDaylight to try and Dockerize it would probably be very, very apropos to them to be able to just discuss from this point of view what's required. Because normally when we're looking at it, we're always looking at the SOA world and their concerns. We don't have as much information coming from the SDN world. So I've been told many times, Karaf is starting to feel like we have this split brain personality, where the SDN container for Honest and for OpenDaylight, we're also the container for all these ESBs and integration platforms. So when we're getting feedback mainly from just the integration side, we're atrophying on the support we can give you guys in SDN. So it's that continuous process of saying, look over to our projects when it's appropriate and start sending patches back this way, communicating with our community, and just being able to assist you to make it easier. So that way, if it's something we're maintaining at Karaf, once we have our ability to just create on-the-fly Dockerized containers of Karaf, then you just reuse it and we're maintaining it. So it's a good way of, and then that helps our SOA users too, because they will want the same kind of functionality.
Sounds great. Looking forward to exploring it.
Awesome. Yes, sir.
Does Karaf itself consume a lot of CPU resources?
So Karaf itself is actually rather minimal. Generally, when you're running it like just fresh out of the box, it has just a base minimal number of services running. So configuration admin, hot deployment folders being monitored, the basic OSGI core and the core services, compendium services surrounding OSGI core is there, and then the command line if you're actually running command line. You can run as a service and then SSH in, so SSH is another service running. Generally on like a regular machine, I'll see it maybe consuming 3-4%. It's always an idle CPU until you actually install something that's heavily using the CPU. So a camel router, you're running a router test or something that's actually going to pound the CPU threads down. But by itself, it's generally very, very, very lightweight. I mean, base Karaf, Karaf 3, you're looking around a couple hundred, maybe up to 200 megabytes of RAM being used. Karaf 4, because of DS, it's shrank that memory footprint. So it's pretty lightweight. I can get it to run on a Raspberry Pi or Edison, which if you're familiar with the Edison, that's that little dual-core 500 thing that's about the size of a postage stamp. So if you can run there, it's not that heavy on the big iron servers that OpenDaylight gets to enjoy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. More questions or ideas of what we can do to help, or ways to get the communities to start discussing issues? So when something is found, or how to report issues back to our JIRA, or how to contribute code. We're on GitHub, so we just do pull requests, or you can send patch requests to us, or attach it to an email. Generally, we want it on the JIRA. That's the main place we want to go to. But I mean, we take it as patches, we take it as pull requests. We don't have GPP signing of the actual code coming into those. Generally, it's just a case of you're going on JIRA saying, hey, I had this little issue here on this plugin, or this command, I've added a brand new flag to do a new action. Here's the attached patch, please review, and one of us will come around and review the code, and if it's up to scratch, then we'll bring it in and we'll put it and apply it to the correct code branch as required.
Do you have documentation for all these things?
So for Karaf 4, all the manuals are up on the Karaf website. So the 4.0 you'll get as HTML, or you can pick it up as a PDF. The DECANTER is currently in vote, so this should be, if it passes its vote, would probably be up on the website by the end of the weekend.
Okay.
Right now, it's been developed against Karaf 4 because that's our latest, greatest. I'm not sure if there will be enough. If there's enough community interest and people come in and give hands to move things backwards, I'm sure that could be done. But right now, it would be against master just because there's only so many cycles that we're an open community just like you. So right now it's against Karaf 4.0, and it's literally, this is something that's in flight. It's up on our vote, and then by the weekend it should be finally up and out.
So what is your feeling? You have discussed with other folks
Mm-hmm.
and these other platform people. Is there any plan, or what do you recommend if there is no plan yet, to migrate to Karaf 4?
So there's a couple of different ways we can move forward. We are still supporting and doing service releases of Karaf 3.0x. So .4 just came out, .5 will be out in a number of weeks, and then .6 and .7. 4 is already established. 4.01 will come out in a number of weeks as well, so the service releases will happen there. The question will become, if there's enough community calling out to our user requests, on our email addresses, our dev email addresses, our IRC channels, all of that, saying, we need to cut a 3.0 style code, but we need to have a brand new OSGI core, for example. Karaf 3 is OSGI spec 5. Spec 6 is already out. Do you want to have Karaf 3 with OSGI spec 6 built in, and then get all the latest jars that are out there with patch fixes? Other than that, keep the identical Karaf 3 code set. So the architecture, the logic, and how things are currently working, keep all of that, but just get the latest set of dependencies. That's always an option, and if there's enough community members saying, yeah, we need this, what Karaf normally will do is they'll say, yeah, we're here in the community, and the community is helping to support and sending in patches to make this happen wherever there's little, rough areas where something may need to be massaged to get the code work on a new version. That's generally what we do. So when you look at Karaf 2.0, it had the .1, .2, .3, .4 major service release branches that were created over the last 5 years to keep it going on that 2.0 style architecture before we went up to the 3.0 architecture. So I can't see there being a major issue to be able to continue the 3.0 architecture. It's just that the community right now, if you got a 4.0 release, we're going to be very heavily looking at what the latest code, just like most developers in open source are going to be doing. They always want to be on the latest, greatest with all the additional new toys, bells, and whistles, and cool features that we have. Actually, as another one on the feature, you have feature start and stop. So if you're installing like feature A, B, and C, and you want to start the feature, stop the feature, it will go down through and it will stop all of that feature bundles and then restart them. It's really cool. The microphone?
Sorry. I would like to get an idea when we can start using all this stuff, because this is something we were looking for a while, to get understanding of these kind of things. So I believe there is nothing like DECANTER before that we can use with the current Karaf.
No, this is the first. We don't have any other monitoring system based on
Okay.
Karaf. This is new.
So yeah, so I don't know.
So
I would like to push for getting this as soon as possible compatible with OpenDaylight, but I don't know, it's probably not you. We need to talk internally in OpenDaylight and see how fast we can go to the new Karaf then.
Yeah, the Karaf 4.0 is already available. It's been out the last month and a half, so you can download that now. We have the documentation. Another one of the big things in Karaf 4 was we did a push to change how we do our documentation. So we're now on ASCII Doctor. It's really kind of improving how we're able to document within our code and within our web page how the Karaf is working. And it's one of those things that when we have the documentation talk here, I'll probably be bringing up that there's various other tools we can do to help improve. We're just saying our practices can help OpenDaylight with its practices as well.
So in broad strokes, what does it take to go from 3.0 architecture to 4.0 architecture?
So in the broad strokes, the big things you're going to have to be looking for is that there's going to be brand new feature repositories where you're going to be picking up the base features that are coming from Karaf. So where SSH comes from, where config-min comes from. It used to be the main set of repos. We now have that across 5 different repositories. So when you're doing your build of the distribution, you're going to have to include these 5 repositories to be able to draw out any arbitrary feature from Karaf. So that has to be done inside of your assembly of OpenDaylight. For creating brand new commands, if you have any custom Karaf commands, you're now going to be, we'll still support the Blueprint way. I don't want there to be any miscommunication there. Blueprint is still inside of Karaf. It's available. You can still make a command using the Blueprint style of that XML file using OSGI command support class and extending and wiring them together. But if you want to use a declarative service model to be able to build your command, you'll want to be using the shell 1.1.xsd for being able to set things up and using the service completion parsing and reference annotation for doing DS style commands. So you'd want to do that. Your old commands will still work. So I don't want there to be any confusion from there. But if you want to create new ones that fit well into that architecture, you'd be wanting to create new things that way. The Karaf Maven plugin, wherever that's being used, mostly wherever a distribution's being built, you're going to have brand new targets. The targets are going to mostly function the same way. They've been cleaned up. There's some brand new targets you can start using for your testing and for your validation. But that shouldn't prevent a port to occur. But there will be some changes because you're going to have brand new target names. Again, this is back into how you're building the OpenDaylight branded Karaf distribution. So it should be limited in that fashion, but any project that has a feature file, and that's the biggest area, when you start writing your features, if you want to start taking advantage of things like having requirements and saying, this machine, if you're publishing, say, as a requirement that this machine has 4 NICs, if there's a way inside of a platform to say to it, this has this type of NIC or this type of a property, like I always use the example of like screen resolution. That would be a case that you would have to be rewriting your features to use the new schema and then use the brand new features there to be able to run on Karaf 4. So it's more of a, if you want to start using the new features, it's going to be an issue. You are going to move from one OSGI spec to another. There's a lot of the base upstream projects that we use, so Aries and Equinox, the PAX family of libraries. They've all had bumps and revisions. PAX Exam has a bump in its revision. Those kind of things have all had those bumps. So I can't tell from outside to say, well, amongst your 40-odd projects, there could be something that will be an edge case in any one of those libraries. So every one of these projects will have to get that, the core controller, it'll have to be updated, and then each one of them will have to be deployed and start seeing, did anything go bang, because we've changed a whole lot of dependencies. Karaf itself has about 106, 108 dependencies that are upstreamed from us, and we bring all that together to make our ecosystem. So your ecosystem on top of ours is that's the difference. All I can make aware to you guys is that we've made these changes, and that's where we are right now as the community. So it gives you a bit of a direction to where we're going, and the opportunity as well. And the opportunity is always there for you guys to send us emails to our user email list, our dev list, get on our RC channel, send things into our JIRAs. We're friendly. We love having things in collaborations with other groups. So just to encourage and keep that information flowing back to us. Any additional questions or any follow-up questions? Well then, right now we're actually tracking pretty much on time. We got about 14 minutes left of our session, so I can return those minutes to you, or if you want to be able to break off and ask questions in person or quietly off to the side, I'm available. So I'll be around here for the next half hour or so if you want to have a more in-depth chat about any of these topics. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'd like to thank you, Louis, for giving me access to his session time slot to be able to redo this conversation from the morning.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.